courage to be real, where real stories break the silence.
Yeah, here we go, guys. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Courage to be Real. Today we have a very special episode. We are being graced with the presence of Dr. Robb Kelly today. He's an addiction specialist, and if you have looked into any of his work, he has a lot of very valuable content out there. He has the Robb Kelly Recovery Group helping people with addiction. And from what I've resonated with this man, a lot of alcoholism that people are suffering from and how it relates to childhood trauma. My name is Jason Plevel and my co-host Drew Foreman here today. We're just going to be having a normal conversation with this man and to see if we can't help shed a little bit of light on the things that people are suffering with. So, Robb Kelly, welcome to our show today.
Thank you,
Welcome.
guys. Great to be here. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me on.
We're very excited to have you. And I personally would love to dive right into something that I picked up on a couple of the episodes that I've watched from other podcasts that you've been on. This guy, John, that you talked.
Yes.
And the story that Drew and I have, and for everybody that's listening, if you have watched any of our previous episodes, Drew has mentioned before how it was kind of divinely aligned, how him and I met. He was ready to jump off of his 4-story condo to kill himself, to become one with the concrete. And that moment kind of set a path for both of us. This John that you interacted with by going to AA sounds like it was a similar story, but it's also, I don't know, kind of woo-woo-y, kind of magical in nature, spiritual in nature. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I wouldn't tell this story for 15 years after it happened because I didn't think people would believe it, and not as if I wanted to. But when I did, the amount of people going, "Oh my God, that happened to me. I had a similar oh, it's amazing." So yeah, I mean, I've been on the streets for 14 months. I died twice on the streets. And they brought me back to life. I hated them guys for that. Sunday night, Monday morning, it would be back ends of Manchester with only offices and factories there. So no people, no houses. I dropped down to my hands and knees and I started to cry like a baby. It was pouring down. I wasn't crying because I'd lost my wife and my children, my money and all that stuff, my family, because they disowned me. I was crying because the first time in my life I realized I couldn't stop drinking. And I looked up to the sky as an atheist because I got molested by my priest. If there's a God up there, I can't do this on my own anymore. That's all I said. About 30 seconds later, this guy walked around the corner and he said, "You need help?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm dying." And his name was Derek. And he said, "Come back to the house. I'm in recovery. I'm a Christian." So off we went back to his house. And we slept. And then I got up next morning, let me shower or bathe. Let me bathe and fed me some good food. And he said, "Listen, here's the deal. I have to go to work and you can stay for as long as you like. But you've got to come to these AA meetings. And I don't want to go to the AA meetings." And he said, "Well, we can't have you drinking in the house. You either come or you got to leave right now." So I went. And I didn't want to go, but I went because it was a dry bed for the evening. And during the meeting, this guy said, "My name's John. I'm a recovered alcoholic." I remember looking at Derek. I said, "What did he just say?" Derek said, "He said he's recovered." And I'm like, how dare he? I've lost everything here. You know, I was homeless. And he's telling me you can recover from this. No, I'm not having that. But when he talked, he made sense. And he talked from the big book of AA. He talked about God. And you see all the guys in the room, eyes rolling when you mentioned God. But there was something about him. And I walked up after the meeting and I said, "Hey, Joe, my name's Rob. Would you sponsor me?" And he said, "No." And it's the way he said it, straight, "No." And just before the ground opened up and swallowed me out of embarrassment, he said, "I'll be your spiritual advisor for 12 weeks. So I thought, okay, that's better than nothing. So what do I need to do? You said, "Get yourself a big book and a dictionary." I said, okay. And the idea was that at 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock every Wednesday night for 12 weeks, I would walk around there. Left Derek's at 6, got there for 6:45, had to stay outside on the ground floor until 1 minute to 7. Then I'd go up and knock on the door. I couldn't knock early. And then after 1 minute to 8, during mid-conversation even, he'd get me up, walk me to the door and bid me a good night and close the door behind me. I thought that was weird, but what he was teaching me is what I use today, first of all them years ago. But he made sense. I felt better. On the last day there, he said, your life's going to change from tomorrow. You know, you're going to travel far away from this country to help people. Remember the words Isaiah 61. I've never read the Bible. I've no idea what that means. So the next day, I'm at home doing a bit of cleaning, and Derek comes home at lunchtime and he said, hey, the guy sweeping the floor at the factory has just resigned. Do you want his job? And I'm like, yeah. So I went back to in his car. I started, and then the boss came over a couple of days later and said, hey, do you want a full-time job doing the same thing? I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you so much. Not thinking about John. Got my first pay packet, which was cash stapled to an envelope. I always remember those days. So I went to the gas station or petrol station back home, bought him a little teddy bear. Guys, it was only this big. That's all I could afford. And I got a card, and I wrote on the card, thank you, John, for introducing me to God, because he took the compulsion to drink away. And I'm almost running to his house, guys, because I'm so excited to tell him that lots of things have happened in such a short time. I'm working with people and they're getting well. I mean, I'm feeling amazing. And when I got there, the curtains look a bit dustier. I don't know why I noticed that. And I knocked on the door, there was no answer. So the woman on the right-hand apartment came out and she says, can I help you? And I said, yeah, where's John? Does he still live here? He's not moved, has he? And she said, John who? I said, John, your neighbor. Well, I'm on nights. I don't know anybody there. I've never seen anybody. Closes the door. Okay, so I went to the left-hand side and knocked on that door, and a big guy came to the door. What do you want? I said, where's John? Has he moved? Has he relocated? John who? I said, your neighbor, John. What's wrong with you guys? He went on to tell me that apartment was derelict, and if we were to walk in, we'd fall 2 or 3 flights down and probably kill ourselves. So I'm thinking these guys are crazy. So I want to get back to the meeting where I met John to meet him again, and hoping that they'll recognize me. So the next night I go back to the meeting where I met John several months ago. And chairman said, hey, Rob. And I'm like, oh my God, thank God for that. I thought I was going crazy. Is John in tonight? And he said, John who? And I said, the guy who was over near the coffee machine speaking to him about going around to his house. He said, oh my God, Rob, we thought you were praying. You were talking to yourself. We've never found that man. And when I started to become wealthy many years later, I hired the best detective agency in Manchester could offer, and we could not find him. But it's one of the reasons we have a 98% success rate and a money-back guarantee if you relapse in what we do today. Because everything he taught me is 90% of what we do today. So I didn't even think about it for many years, and then certain things happened along my journey, certain crazy life or death situations that I always seem to come out of unscathed. And then somebody asked me on a podcast, who do you think John was? And without thinking, I said he was an angel. And that's the story.
Mm-hmm. And I really resonated with that story when I heard it on the other podcasts I was listening to. You had mentioned that when you were having these interactions with this John, whether he was a real person, an angel, or if it was just the figment of your imagination, that you were having a lot of conversations around philosophy and God.
Yes.
And this is kind of where you developed your entire working model for your business. I would love to hear some insight into what it was philosophically and this idea of God that you were discussing.
So the God was not a God. I mean, I don't go to church. I don't read the Bible. I believe my God, which is Jesus, does not want me on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. in a building that I don't know about to receive blessings. I received blessings all day long. Thank you so much. So that's what we talked about. It was a God, but he wasn't a Christian God as such. He wasn't a Catholic. It was nothing to do with that. It was a case of you'll find out as you go along, Rob, that people are chosen to do what we're doing right now, and you're one of those people, and you'll meet thousands and thousands and thousands of other people ready to do that. But he talked about, today would call it neuroscience, but he would tell us that we can change the patterning of the brain. Back in the 80s, Unheard of. Nobody believed it. Even I didn't believe it as a psychologist. But as the time went on, everything he told me came true. That we can recover folly. You can cure addiction. You can't cure alcoholism because of the hypothalamus. But everything he taught me about life itself and God and how life's supposed to be and how we can change it and how we get ourselves into these patterns. He talked about patterns back in the 80s again. It's like, what? Brain doesn't have patterns. We just think what we think. And as time went on, I took them teachings and discovered neuroscience. And then obviously went into deep research on the neuroscience pertaining to any psych stuff. And it kind of it backed up what he was saying. Just like the big book of AA. I don't know whether you know that, guys, but they talk about a psychic change back in 1938. Kick of the mind change, a change of mind. Nobody knew about that. But John was emphasizing on that you can be anybody you want to be. And because my question was, well, why has God put me through this? All the loss and everything. And he said, you were at college, you were at university, you're being taught. There were lessons that you need to learn and go through before you can teach it. And at the time, I thought it was crazy. But now I look back, it's like I would not change one single tear, one single abandonment feeling, because for that, it was like a semester at Harvard University for me. Because these things on the wall don't mean crap. When I'm speaking to somebody who's about to commit suicide, who's got no life and no meaning, and he wants to die, I don't mean nothing. When you can sit down in front of someone, they go, you don't understand, Dr. Rob, you've never been checked. Well, you've never checked. Well, you check. We can do this. We can do this all day long, man, because everything that you're going through, I've already been through, and we know a way out. As time went on, I got more excited about the program, saying, what else? Why stop at addiction? So about 15 years ago, we started to do our research on lots of stuff pertaining to the brain and the mind, the PTSD, depression, all this stuff that relate to the brain, because alcohol has 1% to do with alcoholism. So why would we stop there? And then the last 6 to 12 months, we've been researching Alzheimer's disease. And we have 3 trial patients, and we've seen a 13% increase in short-term memory in such a short time. So I believe there's lots more, just like John was telling me, that we heal from the inside out. We don't heal by taking medication to try to heal us. Diseases and illnesses are down to 2 things, toxicity and deficiency. What am I being poisoned with? And what am I deficient in? And many times we're deficient in stuff that we rely from the store and the supermarkets, that we're eating food, and we're not eating food. We're eating plastic food. So what happens is if I buy something off the shelf and it's got, like, say, for instance, sunflower oil and canola oil, my body, because I've done the testing, my body can't methylate rancid oils. So when we eat stuff, we don't use it in the source that we've eaten it in. It has to be methylated into a source that we can use. Well, I can't methylate that rancid oil, so there becomes a deficiency in my body. That causes the heart problems. Because people think you can catch heart disease from dad. Oh, it's hereditary, it runs in the family. No, it doesn't. That's biologically impossible. Don't even go there with that shit. You should be saying that 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but the evidence shows that the methylation process that dad couldn't methylate, you can't methylate because you're kind of on the same staple diet for years after you leave the home. Because you can't methylate, it causes the heart problems, but it's not been passed down. It's down to our food.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Mic drop.
They say we are
walk
what
off
we eat.
stage.
Mic drop.
We're off to a good start now, guys. We're off to a good start.
So you mentioned,
don't leave us now.
You used the phrase, if there is a God, why would he allow this to happen to me? And there's another man on this call who I've heard use that same phrase multiple times.
I think it's
Also
a very
an
common
atheist.
phrase.
Yeah, for sure. And Drew, you also mentioned how you didn't believe there was a God. Why would he put me through the things that I went through as a kid? And I really resonate with what you were saying, Rob, about how, I wouldn't waste any of these tears that I've shed. There's no regrets going through any of that, because it really pushed me to where I needed to be. I mean, you could let it destroy you, but you chose not to. Or this divine intervention with John happened.
Right. I have a similar divine intervention with Jason. Although, can you see Jason on this call, or am I imagining that there's a third person? I just want to make sure.
I'm going to disappear one of these days too.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So what's very interesting about that, and I firmly believe, and we even talked about this in our last segment, that you cannot change your past. Now, you can do things today, you can do things tomorrow. And a lot of people say, oh, I would change this, or oh, I would change that. But, if you really sit down and you really break it down, would you be where you are? Would you be who you are without your past? My past was brutal. I have a scar from a cigarette burn on my back. You can add 2 and 2 together. And I hid that. My wife saw right through it. When I told her what it was, she even told me what it was before I even told her what it was. And I was a mess. And I had to hit that rock bottom, for lack of better words. I had to be at that point where, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. All my purpose in life, even being a father, we adopted a sweet little boy. He's 9 years old now. My wife is amazing. Jason met her on one of the podcasts, and it's a renewed lease on life that I couldn't handle. I couldn't deal with bringing my past into it.
I was going to say, this is, you said, Drew, that you didn't have the addiction. And I think this is a good segue into one of the next talking points that I wanted to bring up to Rob, because he mentioned in some of his other talks how alcoholism is hereditary, correct? Like the actual alcoholism, and that alcoholics have a predisposition to perceiving trauma a certain way, and that there's a difference between alcoholics and people who abuse alcohol. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. And there's some people that abuse alcohol as their coping mechanism. And Drew mentioned he doesn't have that addiction. That wasn't his coping mechanism, but Drew was an angry guy. And
I was very angry.
The gym was his coping mechanism.
And confusing. Yeah, it's overworking for sure. Absolutely. I buried myself in work. And also, if you do watch the episodes with my wife, and this might be a CSA thing, I confused sex with love. I didn't understand what love was unless it was physical. I didn't think my wife loved me unless it was physical.
Can we talk about that a little bit? The difference between alcoholics that have the alcohol gene, if you want to call it that, versus the people like what Drew is referring to, the people that are using these coping mechanism. What exactly is the difference between that predisposition and how you experience certain life events, whether it's childhood trauma or just not feeling good enough?
The thing what we have to look at is alcoholics hear things different. Alcoholics are born, so you can't drink yourself into becoming an alcoholic. It's hereditary. It's passed down through the family. It can skip generations. In my family, it skipped 2 generations. My brother and sister are fine. I wasn't. So when we did our own science work into the brain about that, we found the hypothalamus, basal ganglia, and the amygdala differ to any other addiction in the world. The moment I drink alcohol, all bets are off. Even my first drink was 9 on stage, musical family. So we're allergic to the ethanol. Nobody knew that. What? We're allergic to the ethanol in alcohol. So the basal ganglia is our repetition, strength, and confirms part of the brain. Good or bad behavior will repeat and repeat and repeat until it becomes a working part of the mind. And then you act out the bad behavior without even thinking about it. Because now it becomes a working part of the mind. So now it's part of the patterning of the brain. That's really hard. Everyone thinks if I drink too much alcohol, I'll be an alcoholic. And that's just not true. That's just not true. There are certain traits around that show from generation to generation. So if we trace it back to fetus level, again, what's it about? It's not about the alcohol. It's all about the way I was born. See, that the hypothalamus is our survival part of the brain. It tells us to eat food and drink water from birth. When we don't have to go over that in school, we just know that that's how we do to stay alive. What we found with real alcoholics is what the hypothalamus would hijack the brain and tell the alcoholic to drink alcohol to survive. That's why I could go days or weeks without food or water, and everything, including my children, were just left behind. because if I don't drink, and this is what alcoholics will know this, while I'm drinking one bottle, I'm worrying where I'm going to get the next one from. Because if I don't drink, I'm not going to live. And that's the big difference. Now, alcoholics are branded around. Jimmy around the corner, he drinks a bottle a day, he's an alcoholic. Well, alcoholism is the only self-diagnosed illness in the world. 10 DWIs do not make you an alcoholic necessarily. So again, we go back to the neuroscience behind it all. In actual fact, the neuroscience behind any psych problem or illness, and that everybody can recover unless you have serious brain damage. Neuroplasticity is a thing. It's been a thing for 15 years, but people don't buy into it. If we opened a clinic today that cured cancer, you won't be able to get in that place for at least 10 years. But we struggle to bring people to us who are fully bought into changing their life because everybody likes the comfort zone. So the quickest way to death is the pursuit of comfort. We all like that, the chairs. Human beings are not meant to sit down. I'm going off on a peak here, guys, but hold on because I'm strapped in here. You never know. We're meant to move around. So we've got to stop selling grandma that it's cold outside and to put an extra bar on the fire. We should be giving her a coat and getting her outside. And I'm living proof of that. I train every day. I run every day. I'm 65 years old. I'm not 65 years old. There's been a mistake there because you don't look like me at 65 years old and you definitely don't act like me. You should mature and act your age. No, thank you. I'm good with that. I'm really good with that.
I say, let's see those guns again, Rob.
Love it. You remind me a lot of Jack LaLanne, and I actually met him back in the late 90s. Yeah. He was my hero.
Do you know who I met back in the late 70s? We were bodybuilding at the time, and we belonged to National Amateurs Bodybuilding Association, NABA, and Arnold came over for a visit and a talk. He wasn't doing posing, he was talking about nutrition, and we got to pick him up from the airport and take him to the hotel and then get him to the show on time. It was just a one gig, one time. So we took him back to the hotel, and this, when I look back, was one of the reasons why I delved into the capability of the mind and the endless possibilities, and how if we believe something, it can happen 100%. And we're talking, and I said to him, the bodybuilding is great, blah, 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 but after the bodybuilding goes, what you going to do? So you're not going to be this size forever. And he said in really broken English, I'm going to do 3 things with my life. And I said, beautiful, man, tell me number 1. And he said, and I quote, I'm going to become the highest paid movie star in the world. Well, we nearly fell off the chair because this guy can't even speak English properly. So we sat there and we looked at each other, me and my friend, and said, okay, what's the second one? And he said, I'm going to become a governor of a state in America, preferably California. Well, I thought you had to be born in America to become a governor. So, okay, Arnold. And what about the third one? I'm going to marry into the Kennedy family. Check, and freaking check.
Yep.
And that's what I got into the neuroscience and the possibilities of what are endless possibilities of who we can become and what we can achieve. The guy was just so disciplined and was so confident. When I came over here, I was telling people that I'm going to become a millionaire, that I'm going to rule addiction, that my face is going to be known, I'm going to be on national TV, and people laughed and laughed and laughed. In actual fact, they stripped me of my psychology license because they said I was teaching woo-woo stuff. I lectured to those guys today, by the way. Anyway, it took me 9 months to get it back, but everything I've said I've done, and much more. I do things that we're not supposed to do as alcoholics, and abuse children is what I do. I opened a full-blown British restaurant next door to my offices in San Antonio. Fish and chips, pints, all the stuff you get over there, we hand-bake it. My financial guy called me up and said, Rob, if you do this, I can't advise anymore because you're going to drop 200 grand on a freaking restaurant in San Antonio. You must be insane. We've been open 2 years and we're in the top 12% of highest performing restaurants in San Antonio and 25 miles around. None of us had experience in restaurants. I brought my sister over to run it. She's never worked in a restaurant, but we believed we could do it, and we did. And that's the part of the mind that intrigues me. Because if you're at home watching this and thinking, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, I want to apologize to you because somebody's put that there. What about kids? Remember kids who's kicking a ball? Johnny, where you want to be? They got kids harbors them dreams. You can do anything you want to do, and you can be anybody you want to be. I mean, people talk about money. I always thought that if I earn $1 million, everybody would know that I'm successful, and I have money, and everyone would be proud of me, and, look at you, look at you. And I got to my first million. I thought, well, I need 5 now. Got to 5, I need 10 now. It's like, no, it was an internal job. You cannot heal from the outside in. You have to heal from the inside out. And we are our biggest healers. And people want to stuff us with pharmaceutical drugs and expect us to get well. It's like, nobody's coming, guys. We're on our own here. We do not want to put our hands in other people's who don't give a crap. You've got to get real.
And speaking of that, sorry, Drew, go ahead. I know you've been trying to say something for a little bit. Go ahead.
I was going to say, unfortunately, the doctors will not cure you. It's $1 billion industry to just force pills down your throat.
Yeah.
Nope.
They're not there to cure us. They'll tell you that. When I'm conferencing, I ask a question to the audience. Have you ever been to the doctor with an ailment or disease or anything, apart from antibiotics? He's give you a pill for it. You've taken the pill. It's cured the illness, and you never take the pill again. And the stadium goes quiet. Of course they haven't. Of course they have. It's not their industry. It's sad.
It is very sad, but it lines the pockets of the right people, so it's going to continue.
Drew, people come here all the time. Drew, they come into the office, they go, Dr. Robb, I'm so depressed. Oh my God, I'm so depressed, Dr. Robb. Oh, I'm so sorry, Mrs. Smith. Okay, then, well, how long have you been depressed? Oh, about 5 years now. 5 years. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Do you take medication for that? Yes, I take Wellbutrin. Oh, okay. How long have you been taking that? 3 years. When do you think it's going to kick in? But you keep taking the medication, but you're still depressed. What has this world come to?
Yeah.
Nobody's coming for you guys. Got to do it on your own.
The podcast I was listening to earlier too, Rob, you were mentioning SSRIs and how it's just a deficiency in serotonin. Well, nobody's looking at why the deficiency is there in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Simple question. Why is my serotonin low? That's it. Look in the medical dictionary. Depression, like a serotonin.
Yep.
So I want to ask, you talk a lot about healing. You do a lot of healing work. I know the importance of that. And you mentioned how we need to heal ourselves from the inside out. I can only imagine you're so good at what you do because of all of the studying that you've done, and you've got 2 PhDs, correct? Okay. But I can only imagine you also have experienced some of your own pain. And so if we can be real for a second, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what have you had to heal from personally?
So the trauma of losing my children obviously was one of those that cut deep. It really cut deep. The molestation from the priest didn't really cut deep until about 10 years ago when I had to go back and do some more trauma work, and it all came out. But can I be real for a second, guys? There are still days today. I still have days when I can't get out of bed because I'm so depressed. And I also do all days cry. I have never shared that information. Never shared that information because it's not my job to share that and go, hey, look at me, I'm so sick. That's my job to turn up and inspire you to do something. So I remember doing a talk. I used to do an AA thing every Saturday morning with the homeless in a homeless shelter. And there were hundreds of people there. And my dad died on the Thursday, and Saturday I showed up. And I did a great talk, and everyone's inspired and stuff. And I come off, and my sponsor said, you okay? So my dad passed away Thursday night. What the hell are you doing here? It's not their problem. My problem is to heal. I have therapists and doctors and sponsors around me. That's what God gave me right now. But it's not my intention to do that. But deep down inside, I have pain of loneliness still. Because you get to a certain level and the guys here, your friends don't want to know you because now you're all rich and fancy. And the guys who are born into money, they don't want to know you've come from the streets. You're not going to be around long. So when you start podcasts and stuff like that, it's a very lonely place to be. I've got probably one person I could call up. Now, I don't have best friends. I don't have friends as such. I have got acquaintances. But when you're constantly working in this arena, changing the dynamics and the whole patterning around addiction, people either hate you or they love you. And that's it, you know? So yeah, it's a long journey. It's lonely. I get very depressed sometimes, not often, but when it happens, I cancel the day and I roll up in bed and I stay there all day. My wife feeds me chocolate and candy and stuff. And I get through the day and I get up next morning and let's do it again, guys. Probably once a year, maybe. You're still there. Every time I see a daughter with a father and the daughter's 6 or 7, 8, 10, 12, 15, that pains me.
Mm-hmm.
It hits me right in the stomach. Every time I speak to Charlie, which is my daughter, every time I talk to her about certain things, about patience, it hurts me because I know what she's talking about. I put her through that. That's what makes her so good, because she works with the kids of my patients, you know? So anybody thinking that I'm here, I'm rich, I have it all, everything's amazing, follow me home. Follow me home. You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't sort this out and your trauma, it's living in misery, man. And I'm still a work in progress. And I want to be perfectly imperfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Appreciate you sharing.
That's real.
I appreciate the vulnerability.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Can I ask about the molestation with the with the
so
priest?
the thing is, back in my
Rob,
day.
Oh, I'm sorry. Specifically,
go
I was curious. What hurt more, the molestation or the fact that your mother denied when you brought that up?
I think it was mom. This priest, choir master, headmaster, all in one back in the day, they normalized that shit. So I didn't know it was sexual abuse. And then when I told my mom and she hit me with that wooden shoe, you know, you never mention it again. It was the betrayal from mom, you know? And it's funny, an old school friend from 52 years ago got in contact with me. He saw me on TV back in England, and his name's Tony, and we reunited after all these years about 4 weeks ago. And we were getting into some of this stuff, and I said, you know, he said, well, Mr. Raby is, you know, I said, yeah, you won't think it's good when I tell you what he did to me. And do you know what he said to me, guys? Yeah, I know. Did it to me too.
Mm.
And the relief, believe it or not, that I got off that was amazing. But definitely, mom. But what a question.
Going through a process like that and then understanding that other people have shared your suffering makes you feel a little less alone. And so I want to bring this back full circle to my original question. People that are born with the alcoholic gene have a predisposition to perceive events like that as more traumatic. And I'm not minimizing it. I appreciate you sharing that, and the fact that you were so open with us. Like, that's a hard thing to share and a hard thing to go through. So thank you for sharing and allowing us to witness that existence. But what makes the difference between somebody experiencing it that has that alcoholic predisposition and somebody not? And how can you fast track your healing when you start to identify with these traumatic stories?
Alcoholics and some addictions were more sensitive. The brain is very sensitive, and that's why we get offended and hurt real easy, despite being, 250 pounds and 6'5", and, we hear things completely. So there was a true incident with me and my brother stood on the kitchen table once, and my mum came in, and this is where the research comes from. My mum came in and said to us both, "Will you get down off that table before your dad gets in? Get down, you stupid idiots." My brother jumps down and I freeze. Why have I frozen? What I heard, "Flat table," is what I heard. So when I realized that years and years on, I went back to do some research around that. And we are very sensitive people. So the ventromedial and prefrontal cortex is also slightly damaged from the stuff I've been through. And then, even the hippocampus to a little bit degree is, as a regulation thing, guys, is affected as well. But again, one of the biggest things I'll say is back in the day, they normalized it. So I got my priest or headmaster, choir master, he told my mom that because I was good at singing, I was a choir boy, and he said that he'd contacted the Vienna Boys Choir, and I was going to go to a place called Chester and interview, but we're going to have to stay overnight. Auditioning for the Vienna Boys Choir is a bit like going to Queen, the band, when they're in the mega and saying, hey, I want to audition for being singer. It's stupid. It would never happen. It's crap. And my parents should have known that. But he took me there. And the only thing I knew is I came back 5 or 6 hours later because I was sick. I was sick as a dog. And my mom was so disappointed. During the childhood work, especially the breath box work with the software, we realized that he took me down there and he got me drunk. And that's why I was as sick as a dog. And there was no such thing as the Vienna Boys Choir. He took me there to molest me. And my mum swears to this day that it never happened. Oh, she passed away, but I'm just saying to the end that it never happened. It was all in my mind. And that's why we're really sensitive. We do a lot of work with Catholics, you know, the abuse thing with their victims, which we don't call victims, but they do. We're very sensitive around that because we got to stop normalizing this shit. You know, we've got to stand up, especially men. We've got to stand up. We can't be afraid to cry. We can't be afraid to be vulnerable no matter who you are. I always ask people, when's the last time you cried and who was it in front of? And people go, oh, 2 years ago. That's sad, man.
Every Thursday for us.
Every Thursday, yeah.
So what advice can you share? And our listeners are growing and we have people resonating. And, you know, Jason and I are very open, or becoming even more and more open, more and more vulnerable. And your past and my past, they cross over quite a bit, except for the mushy peas and the Yorkshire pudding. Being in a situation as a CSA, childhood sexual abuse survivor, what can you tell our viewers that are hiding this? Like myself, I hid this for many, many years. There was too much shame involved. But what advice can you just share with them? And it could be any abuse. It doesn't have to be CSA, any abuse whatsoever.
Start dialogue with somebody. That's it. Start dialogue with a friend, or if you're lucky enough to have that relationship with mom and dad, great. But start dialogue, because the more it's in there as a secret, the more the subconscious brain will stash it away, and that will affect your life. And we had to stop research on people that were molested and rapes and stuff like that ended on to take their own life because it was too painful for me to do that research. So we had to pull out of that. So start dialogue. It's 2026, man. I validate you. I validate that act. When somebody told me that just 5 years, I validate, Rob, what happened to you, and I prove that you're telling the truth. It was like a huge weight off my shoulders, even though I was never thinking about that. But once you validate it, for that did happen, and I'm sorry that did happen to you, but let's start the healing, comes down to dialogue. You know, share it with somebody in the right time at the right place. You know, somebody you trust 100%.
Courage to be real, where real stories break the silence.